Hello, everyone, and welcome to this training from the Ridley Democratic Committee. My name is Jen Rieger-Murphy. I'm the Vice Chair of the Ridley Dems, and today's topic is going to be poll grading for the general election that's going to be held on Tuesday, November 5th. So today's agenda is going to be about the poll grading essentials. We'll be looking at what it is like to, what the goals are for graders, the setup that you'll be coming into, and we'll talk about some active grading techniques that you can use, as well as some pre-election day prep. So things to think about before you get to your polling location. We'll also have top questions that we get asked when we're grading, the types of people that you'll see on election day, the types of things to look out for. That's a new slide because we will be seeing, I believe, high voter turnout that day. So lots of interaction with people. And then we'll conclude with some contact information and ways to stay connected with us on election day. So the top greeter goal of the day is to elect Democrats, as many as possible up and down the ballot. And so we do that by distributing the sample Democratic ballot. And we want to hand these out to as many people as possible, whether they're Republicans or Democrats. We also want to be a friendly face as we are representing not only ourselves that day, but also the Democratic Party at large and the candidates that are on our ballot. We also want to be a welcoming presence in general to everyone, whether they're voting for Democrats or not. It's really important to maintain some civility and welcome all people who are practicing their right to vote. We are also going to be the eyes and ears on any potential hindrances to voting. So we're all working together as a team to make sure that anyone that is eligible to cast a vote is able to do so on election day. So here's some things to think about before you show up to your assignment that day. We do have a 10-minute video. It might be a little shorter than that. It's just going over the people that you will see on the ballot, the people that are running for the different offices and who people can cast votes for in the Democratic Party. We also want you to think about your comfort that day. So some of our greeters are doing 2-hour shifts, some of them are doing half day, some are doing a 12 to 14-hour full day. So we want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable when they're working with us and volunteering. So think about presentable but comfortable clothes and shoes to wear. We also have ordered really nice weather that day, but if anything changes, just be checking the weather, make sure that you bring an umbrella, have it tucked away in your car in a tote bag. A lot of our polls are out in the elements, so there's a lot of time that you may be out in the sun if it's very sunny out, so maybe bring some sunscreen. You might want to bring a sun hat or a warm hat that day because November can get pretty cold, and maybe some sunglasses as well. Whatever you think is going to make you comfortable during your shift. Some people bring a portable chair with them. That's certainly optional. You're welcome to do so. Most of our polling locations are staffed with some chairs and tables, but you may want to bring one just so that you know you definitely have a seat. And then if you're anything like me, I have to eat like every 2 hours. So if you need food, it's always good to have some snacks on hand just in case, and a beverage as well. If you are working during the lunch shift, we will reimburse you for lunch. So make sure if you are ordering some food that you have a receipt. There are some polling places where they'll take a large order together and someone will take care of that, but not every polling place may be doing that. So just keep your receipts so that we can reimburse you. And then lastly, some people like to bring things like a phone charger or a battery pack, especially if they're working a half or full day, because their battery can drain if they're using it. And in this picture, I always like to point out the idea I got from one of our returning volunteers, Donna from media. She was working one of the later shifts on an election day and came with one of her camping lights. So I went out and purchased one as well. It's really helpful if you're working towards the end of the day and it's dark out because you can still bring some light to your table and showcase our candidates. So in terms of the setup, most people will be coming to their poll to work after someone has already been there to set up. We set up pretty early at like 6:45 in the morning. If you're interested in helping us with that, let us know. We do have a couple locations where we could use your help. But this is, we've shown some pictures here that show what it looks like to set up a polling place. As I mentioned before, most of our polls are outside in the elements. So that would be the second picture that you see there. And there are some that are within an enclosed area. So there's a picture there too. Every setup will usually have a table and 2 chairs at the very least. You should be close enough to the voters where you could hand them the ballot if you were sitting down from your chair. But you want to make sure that it's not obstructing the path. So the example is in the second photograph there. You can see the man who happens to be my husband. I took the picture. He's standing there at the table that we've set up right by the path of the voter. So he would be an example of a voter coming to get some information at the table. But if I were sitting in one of those chairs, I would clearly be able to easily hand him the ballot. And the reason we say this about the setup is because in years past, sometimes the table has been set further back from the path, and people have interpreted it as maybe like just an information table, like a just in case I want to go up and talk to these people. So if you have the table closer to the path, it makes it easier for you to sit if you need to take a break, but you can still be handing people that ballot. So every location will have a large stack of sample ballots. We've ordered enough for every single voter in a precinct plus 10%. So nobody should be running out of ballots. And that is the most important thing to get into anyone's hands on election day. You may see some candidate literature on the table. There's usually not going to be enough for every voter. Sometimes you may want to use some of them as desk copies so that people can come to the table and see it. And then you don't have to worry about running out of literature, but there will be some, and it'll vary to greater or lesser extents at each polling place. We also usually have a stack of I voted stickers that are a great thing to give out to people after they voted. They do like getting those and wearing those to remind people around them that today is election day and they should be voting. And lastly, we have this QR code that's pictured here. It's a way to capture people's information if they want to sign up and get more information from us and potentially volunteer in future elections. So all you need to do is have your phone out, hover over it with the QR code as if you're about to take a picture, and it will link you right to the form. So either you can put input information for people who may want to volunteer with us, or they can do it on their phone. This is a nice way to just get it to us as quickly as possible without worrying about losing the papers, which has happened in the past. The one note on that to keep in mind is that we don't want to ask them for this information before they vote, because while it is not the intention, it could be seen as voter intimidation. So if you strike up a conversation with someone that seems really excited to get involved, ask for that information after they've voted. So here's an example of another setup. And some other things to keep in mind is that when we are greeting, we want to make sure our table and all the people that are greeting are at least 10 feet away from the entrance to the polling location. So this is an example of one of our precincts, and the polling entrance is in the background there where the woman is walking through. And our greeters are definitely 10 feet away from that entrance, and they are not blocking the path. There's actually a much larger section of pathway that you can't see in this picture, so there's plenty of room for people to get around. So that's the one thing. You want to make sure that you're at least 10 feet from the polling place. And you are welcome to use the restrooms in a polling location as long as you make sure you have no political buttons, or that your clothing, if you're wearing a shirt that has a candidate on it, that it's covered when you go in. Voters are welcome to wear whatever they want to the polls, so they can have a Kamala Harris for President shirt on, and they can go in and do that, and that's no problem. But anyone that is working the election should not be going in with anything on them that is political in nature. And you want to just make sure that you're never blocking the pathway. So if you're talking with a person on their way in and you're having a nice conversation, just make sure that you're not obstructing the pathway of someone else. Some of the paths to the polling locations are much more narrow than the one pictured here. So next we'll talk about active greeting. So sometimes people think when they're greeting, like, what difference am I really making? I'm sitting there, people have already made up their minds for who they're voting for. And that's largely true. But at the same time, to be a friendly face of the Democratic Party, it's a huge deal, especially in Ridley, where we are slowly making gains in our voter registration, but we are still outnumbered by Republicans. So when I started doing this work about 8 years ago, I was the only greeter at my polling place. And before me, there was no one. And there were like 7 Republican greeters. So people would take the sample ballot from the Republicans because they just kept handing them out to everyone. And I would stand there and say, would you like a sample Democratic ballot? And the Democrats that were coming to vote always would kind of whisper to me, thank you so much for being here. This means a lot. So just keep in mind that if you're doing this for the first time or you haven't experienced it yet, that it does mean a lot to people that you're there giving them the sample ballot. And just another note that sometimes people don't know all the races that are being covered. So they definitely are probably top of mind with the fact that Kamala Harris is running for president, but they might not know about all the races. So the sample ballot helps orient them just so that they know that these are the people that are running within their party and these are the positions they're running for. So generally, if I'm standing there, I will greet them, good morning, would you like a sample Democratic ballot? We usually get one of two answers. Yes, thank you so much, and they take it and they move on. Or maybe they stop and ask you a few questions, but they accept it with glee. And then the other answer we might get is, no thanks, I'm a Republican. Now, during a general election, I do like to add to that, you can vote for Democrats in the general election today if you would like. Sometimes the subtext of no thanks, I'm a Republican means I'm not voting for any Democrats today, thank you very much. But there have been other instances I've experienced where people don't know that they can vote for people in a general election outside their party because they're used to voting in the closed primaries where they can only vote for people within their party. So it is a good reminder for people because not everyone knows that. And wouldn't it stink to miss that opportunity for them to vote for a Democrat just because they simply thought logistically they couldn't? So that's the way that it's done in terms of the active greeting and making sure that you're identifying yourself with a Democratic ballot. So a couple things to remember with that. Even if a Republican greeter offers a sample ballot to someone, don't assume that the person they're handing it to is a Republican. A lot of times people in our community know each other. They probably know a lot more about their party affiliation than anything, but not all times. And they're handing it out just like we're trying to hand it out to everyone as well. The difference is that we want to identify that we're giving them a Democratic ballot. And sometimes I've heard the other side just kind of hand it out as if it's the definitive ballot. And then I'm there to say, would you like the Democratic ballot? So it's important just not to assume that just because someone has taken the Republican ballot that they're voting all Republican or that they're voting Republican at all. The other thing that we had just already gone through, just to remind yourself, is that sometimes people are confused about which parties they can vote for in a general election. So it's always good to remind them that they can vote for Democrats if they'd like. So here is a picture of the sample ballot. This is just meant to be a reference. This is not what the actual ballot looks like, and we'll look at the actual ballot in the next slide, but this is an abbreviated version of it. So it's really just putting on paper the names of the Democrats so that they stand out to the voters. Sometimes they just need a little bit of help and they just want to get oriented and know what all races are on the ballot today and who are we recommending that they vote for in the Democratic Party. So we have the president race with Kamala Harris. We have Bob Casey running for re-election to the U.S. Senate. We have Eugene D. Pasquale for Attorney General. We have Malcolm Kenyatta for Auditor General. We have Aaron McClellan for State Treasurer. Mary Gay Scanlon for re-election with Congress. And then we have Leanne Kruger running for state rep. Keep in mind that Ridley Township has 2 state reps, so depending on where people live, they will either see Leanne Kruger running for re-election or Dave DeLoso running for re-election. Here's what a actual ballot will look like when the voter goes into the polls. Now, if you can see this, you'll notice that there's a lot of names on this. There's 4 different groups of people running for president and vice president within different parties. And same for US Senate and so on. So our sample ballot is meant to just get to the point and tell you which names we're recommending that they vote for. And those are the only Democrats that they can vote for. It's just good to have that orientation for them. It's like a little cheat sheet. And the other thing to note is that in the bags that come for the setup with each polling location, there will be a very, very large copy of the actual ballot that usually people will tape to the wall outside. So you can actually lead a voter to it if they need to see a bigger version of what they're actually going to be voting on. So what kind of questions do we get on election day from our greeting process from the voters? The first thing they might ask is this my polling location? It's not a common question because a lot of people have already voted at their polling place, so you may not get that question at all. But if you're there at 8 o'clock in the morning and the line is really long and someone's questioning it, they can go to a variety of different websites to find their information by just inputting their address. So Vote 411 is an easy one to remember. You can also go to the Department of State in Pennsylvania and put your address in, and then that will tell them. Especially if they're waiting in line, they probably want to look it up. But if they're just walking right into the polls, the judge of elections can quickly tell them where they should be voting. So don't worry if you don't know the answer, but these are simple and easy tools to find that information out. Do I need an ID to vote? Well, this is a hot topic if you're talking to Republicans because they think that everyone needs one. But you really only, state law only requires that you need to show it if you are voting for the first time at this polling place. So if you've moved to this location, or if you've changed your name, say you've gotten married and your name has changed. Those are the two main reasons why you would be showing your ID. And there's many different forms of ID. So usually people have no problem with that, to presenting something to prove their identity, but just keep that in mind that that's a question. I have a mail-in ballot with me. That's another question. Sometimes people bring those in and they say, can I drop it off at my polling place? During COVID, that was something that was allowed. It has not been the case since then. So what they can do is they can either, if they've filled out everything, they can go and put it in a Dropbox location. There's a website here and we'll have a printout of all the addresses where they could do that by 8 p.m. on election day. Or they can surrender the mail-in ballot and they have to have everything with it, the envelopes and everything. And they can surrender it at their polling place and cast a regular vote. So those are the two options. Under no circumstances should anyone put it in the mail. This nearly stopped my heart about 2 elections ago, where somebody was walking by and I overheard her talking to a Republican who said, yeah, you can put it in the mail. And I immediately jumped in and said, no, that's not the case. So I think the guy was misinformed when he gave that information, but that vote would not have counted had she put it in the mail. So being the eyes and ears outside is really important because that's a vote that could have been lost had we not clarified the situation. So they can either surrender it or they can drop it off in a Dropbox, or they can go to the County Board of Elections as well. There's a Dropbox there. Just don't put it in the mail. Who are the types of people that you'll see on election day? You'll see lots and lots of voters. The last presidential election was popping during certain parts of the day, very long lines. That moved pretty quickly, but 7 a.m. people were ready to vote. So that's something that you will see. And the anticipated high volume times are the first thing when the polls open till about 9:30 when people start going to work. You'll see a lot more during the lunch hour when people are on their break. And then from 5 to 8 p.m., it should probably be pretty busy. You'll see candidates outside the polls from time to time, most likely state reps who are closer to home and can make more of the rounds. The statewide candidates might not be going to as many polling places. You'll see Republican greeters for sure. And you'll also see people that are working inside the polls. They might be coming out for a break or to say hello to a family member. Most of them will be inside for much of the day, but they might come out for a quick break. You will also see poll watchers. They're also known as poll observers. So these are people that have certificates from the county and they are authorized to go in and just observe. So they're the eyes and ears of the inside, just like you're the eyes and ears of the outside. And they are responsible. They can work with the judge of elections and other people to solve problems. It's mostly the judge of elections that will take care of those kinds of things, but you're also another set of eyes and ears if you're in as a poll watcher. We staff our poll watchers to be poll greeters as well, because they don't really need to be inside the polls at all times. They're just going in and out, kind of just taking a scan of things and making sure everything's running smoothly. So you will most likely be greeting with some poll watchers as well. And these will be people that you'll want to touch base with if you do have any concerns or questions. They'll probably be your first line of defense, because they will be working with people inside the polls to alert anyone to any concerns that they have. You may come into contact with some lawyers for election protection. It's not uncommon for them to approach people who are working on election day, whether they're volunteers or they're working inside, just to say, has everything been going pretty smoothly from what you can tell? Has any voter been turned away for any reason? They just want to make sure that everyone that's eligible to vote can do so that day. And you'll see lawyers from both sides. So it's likely that a lawyer representing the Democratic Party will come up to someone on our side, and a Republican lawyer will come up to someone on the other side. And lastly, you may see a constable at your polling location. It's not common, but at times a judge of elections may call on somebody to come to preserve the peace. So this is a new slide that we created. It's mainly something that we've looked at for poll watchers, but it's equally important for poll greeters, especially during a high volume election. Things to look out for: we want to just make sure that that if there are long lines, that they're moving at a decent pace. that there was no delay in opening the polls. So if you start your day at 7 a.m. and you notice that the poll hasn't even opened, that's a big concern. Most things run pretty smoothly in Ridley, so hopefully you won't be seeing any of that. Are there any accessibility issues? Is anyone having a hard time getting into the poll? Is there a ramp for someone who has a wheelchair? Is anyone having a difficult time getting into the polling place? Is there any talk that you hear of, oh yeah, they ran out of ballots in there? Can you believe that? Or the machine is broken. These are things that the judge of elections is likely in the process of resolving if you hear anything like that, but it's good to take note if you are hearing that. Are voters being turned away? So a voter might go in thinking this is their polling place, and someone tells them, no, this isn't your polling place. The next thing that somebody should be doing, and a poll watcher will be looking for this inside, is somebody finding out where this person should be voting and telling them this information? And is it close by? Hopefully it's not like across the state if they just moved. They can vote provisionally at the polling place that they're at if they're in the wrong location. However, it's always in the best interest if they can make it to their correct polling place that they do so, because provisional ballots get counted last, and it's more important that they are able to cast their vote in the correct polling place. One time we had a woman who walked out and said, you know, I had to take a bus here and now I have to go take another bus to get to my place. We did have someone that was able to give her a ride, but that's because, you know, she felt like safe doing it. And we're not suggesting that people do that, but it was a nice story because this person worked to make sure that this woman's vote was going to be counted and that she would be voting in the correct place. But if all of that fails and they want to vote provisionally, they are entitled to do so if they want to. Voters in line by 8 p.m. cannot be turned away. So just keep that in mind. If you're working the late shift to 8 p.m. and there are 20 people in line, let's say, they should all be able to vote, even though it's 8 o'clock. The polls cannot turn them away if they are in line by 8 p.m. So keep that in mind. There might be signs of intimidation. It could happen. It's a very, you know, it's a very hot and heated election. Everyone has real strong opinions about their candidates. If you see a police present that was not called for by the judge of elections, that's something to tell the poll watcher, unless it's someone that has been called by the judge of elections. If there are police just standing outside, that's something to call out or to report. If there are candidates going inside the polls, unless they're there to vote and that's their polling place, they should be outside. There's no politicking of any kind inside the polls. A lot of times candidates will come and bring donuts or something. They should not be the ones going in. Unless they're voting, they should not be doing any of that. If there's anyone heckling or giving false and misleading information and saying, Democrats, you actually got to vote tomorrow, that's like an extreme example, but that would be something that's very misleading and needs to be stopped immediately. We did have one instance where a woman on the other side was heckling voters, saying, if you're voting for Democrats, you're voting for the party of something like sin or something. You know, that kind of stuff is intimidating to voters, and that has to be dealt with immediately. It's not for you to have to deal with, but to report it to the poll watcher or report it to someone like me or the chair of the Ridley Dems, and we'll get you that contact info shortly. And lastly, if there's any other act that's just making anyone feel uncomfortable, that should also be called to attention as well. So here's kind of like the line of communication in terms of the issues and when to call who. So the first contact would be your Democratic poll watcher for any questions or concerns. You notice someone made a comment that might be found to be intimidating to voters, and the person is just standing on the corner and they won't go away. They're just heckling people. Find your poll watcher, let them know so that they can tell the judge of elections, and the judge of elections should be able to come out and deal with it or report it to someone so that we can stop that. If you can't find the poll watcher, can't get in contact with them, you can always text Bella and myself. I would say text both of us, and please include your name and the polling location that you're at. I would say, if you could, maybe get out your phone now and put the info in just so you have it ready to go. Bella's is 610-659-5822. And my phone number is 484-678-3579. So we will be circulating throughout Ridley during the whole day, just to make sure that we're helping with any situations that we can and reporting it to people when we can't do anything further. And then if you're in an emergency, if you're in any situation where you feel unsafe or you feel you have to leave, then leave. If it is an emergency where you need to dial 911, then please do so. And please contact us, myself and Bella, after you've gotten to a safe area. We haven't really had any issue like that before, but you always want to plan for an emergency and know what you need to do. We have a very dedicated group of people, of volunteers, of poll workers throughout Ridley. We have 16 polling locations. And we all have worked together over the years, some of us for like 8 consistent years of elections, where we have gotten to know the Republicans and have established a really good rapport with everyone that we work with on election day. So, we're confident that we'll have a very successful day and it will be peaceful. We just want to make sure that we have a plan in place for anyone that has any concerns about anything going on during the day. And that concludes the presentation. So I hope that you got some information that will be helpful to you on election day and that you feel empowered to do the role. We couldn't do this without you. I want to give a special shout out to the people that have returned time and time again. I want to give a shout out to the people who are doing it for the first time. I hope that you have an incredible day. It's one of my favorite days of the year. I also want to give a shout out to all the people that come outside of Ridley to help us. We couldn't do it without you. Our friends in media, Swarthmore, Rose Valley, Rutledge, and any places I haven't mentioned, you're just so valuable to us. And we can't thank you enough. So we look forward to spending time with you on election day and celebrating this historic election and electing Democrats up and down the ballot. Thank you, and we'll see you then.